What's up, fucker? It's your boy, Jack Slack, Fights Gone By podcast, coming at you on Monday the 2nd of November. And we're going back into lockdown over here. So, if you hear me getting more and more crazy over the coming weeks, that's what's happened. Though, being in proper lockdown does mean that I get a lot more written, so never been a more perfect time to join the Patreon. Especially as I panic bought a squat rack. So, give me your money. But we're talking about the fights this weekend. They were really... There was a lot going on. None of them were, amazing. The UFC didn't even award a Fight of the Night bonus. But there was some very interesting stuff going on. There was some funny stuff going on. Gegard, Musassi and Uriah Hall competed once again. The third fight in their rivalry was the fight to have the least impressive performance in a gimme matchup this weekend. And it was tight. It was really tight. But... we had a Bellator, we had a One, we had a UFC, we had some boxing going on. I watched Usyk versus Derek Chisora, and that really hammered home the difference between an actual heavyweight and someone going up to heavyweight, because Derek Chisora had about 3 stone on him. They kept saying 3 stone on the broadcast because we're British, but a stone is 14 pounds, so, so you're looking at 45 pounds there, almost. And he just looked like a fridge, basically, walking around the ring after Usyk. And for the first 2-3 rounds, Usyk looked like, he was being bullied around by his big brother. He was doing really good entering into the clinch, getting banged up with these little, short, slappy shots on the inside. But then, the other day I was watching, it was Povetkin versus Dillian Whyte. And Dillian Whyte's dropping him with this left hook that's like a hammer fist, because he doesn't even raise his elbow. He just sort of swats the guy, but he knocked him down twice with it. Because these enormous dudes just generate power from nothing. It's almost unfair if you're a normal-sized person. Or, Alexander Usyk is not a normal-sized person. He's a big dude. He's 6'4", and he's, north of 200 pounds. I can't remember what the cruiserweight limit is, or if he cuts a lot of weight to make it. But, he's a big dude, and he just looked tiny in this ring against Chisora. And in fairness, there was a lot of talk about how well Usyk did, because Usyk was expected to win. He did well with his technical boxing and his counterpunching, and he made Chisora look like a clumsy brawler. But I thought Derek Chisora leaned into the idea of being the brawler quite well. So he was trying to lean on him, use the clinch, weigh on him a bit, and then rather than try and, box with a much superior boxer, not a very technical boxer, his best punch, Chisora typically, certainly back in the day when I used to watch him regularly, was his left hook. But I don't know what he does now. Last I saw of him was the fight with White. But in this one, he was opting to step through to jab southpaw and then try and swing the left overhand, which was interesting. It was Dustin Poirier-esque. But it did mean that Usyk could line up this weird lead uppercut counter shot, because Chisora would step in and present it by switching stances and squaring up. And the other boxing match I watched this weekend was Tank Davis, Gervonta, Tank. The guy who was supposed to fight Tenshin Nasukawa. But I haven't watched him in a while either. And in this fight particularly, he looked like good Zab Judah. He's southpaw working that counter left uppercut in answer to almost everything, to the body and the head. And I mean, that's what Zab did at his best. And then he'd just have whole fights where he didn't do it and he was just being weird. Very hit and miss character, but Tank obviously a bit more consistent and a bit less inclined to have his fights descend into farce once he got fouled or felt like fouling the opponent. But the finish of that one's absolutely gorgeous too. He backs his man onto the ropes, slips a right straight and uppercuts across himself with the left uppercut all the way, from his left side to the opponent's left side, and knocks him spark out. Absolutely gorgeous. If you've not seen, watch the knockout if you don't have time, but watch the whole fight if you want to see some brilliant southpaw left uppercut work, particularly to the body. But we're here to talk about MMA, not lads putting on oven mitts and slapping each other. And I suppose we better do the UFC card first because it's the most, well known. There were a lot of good finishes on this card, I thought. Well, not even I thought. Most people thought. There was a head kick from Adrian Yanez versus Victor Rodriguez. Actually, that was really interesting the way that got going. One of them was southpaw, can't remember which, but Rodriguez was either south. We'll say Rodriguez was orthodox, could be the other way around. But he threw a rear hand straight, step through with a rear hook, which we like. The shifting right hook is a terrific punch to catch people who are circling away in that direction, which a lot of southpaws do anyway to lengthen you out. But then he stood there too long and got caught with a counter left hand coming back, and that was the beginning of the end for him. He was just on wobbly legs all from then. Jason Will versus Cole Williams was a bit odd. Jason Will just sort of picked him up, slammed him, held him in closed guard and beat him up. And you were looking at Cole Williams going, what are you doing? It's one thing to not be able to play very well from your guard, but he didn't even try and wall walk. He wasn't even trying to get to his hands and get back up. It looked like I don't know what he was trying to do. Maybe throw up a triangle or something, but he just sort of stayed there and got beaten up. And then in the second round, he got passed almost immediately into an arm triangle. Dustin Jacoby came back from his time off he was in Glory for a while, and then he came back to MMA, fought a few fights, and earned his way back to the UFC by winning a decision on the Dana White's, whatever it's called, Contender Series. Justin Ledet, he's a pretty hit-and-miss character, but they were raving about his boxing. And Dustin Jacoby just showed, low kicks still kill boxers. Chopped him up beautifully. It was a really good-looking performance from Jacoby. He was never like a world beater in kickboxing, but he did decently in Glory. He fought a lot of very good guys in Glory. Did he fight? I can't remember. He's been in with all sorts of people, and he was never like the favourite to beat any of them. But it does you good. It's like Joe Duffy's hands look so much better than most people in MMA, and he never beat anyone good in boxing. But he was training with guys like Chris Eubank Jr. and so on. Being around that and being forced to work on that skill, really, it does show when you come back. It's interesting. Like, I would never advise that a fighter take like 3 years off his career to pursue another career and then give up and come back. But it has worked out quite interestingly for a lot of fighters. And then some of them surprised, like Clay, is it Clay Collard? Is doing surprisingly well in boxing. Like, not a world champion or anything, but it's certainly won some fights he shouldn't have, just as like a journeyman boxer. And there's lots of guys who get into MMA and then don't excel at MMA, but continue grappling afterwards and are pretty good at grappling. If anything, it's like if you took lifting analogy, but if you took some time to just focus on your squat, and you weren't too concerned with chasing numbers in all the other lifts, by focusing on one thing a bit more, you might break through some plateaus that you were experiencing trying to work on everything at once. But yeah, Jacoby banged him out. Miles Johns versus Kevin Navidad. That's what I'm going to call him from now on. It's actually Natividad, but Kevin Navidad sounds better. This one was dead cheeky. The fight was ho-hum. There was some good jabbing from Miles Johns and some good left hooking, but he wasn't really putting anything together. No one was landing big telling shots for the most part. He hit a couple of head outside singles, or high crotches, if you're that way inclined. But then, Kevin Navidad shot a takedown on him, I believe in round 2, came up into the clinch, Johns pushed him to the fence, held his glove, and spun into a back fist. And I went, ho-ho, someone's been watching Donald Cerrone. And then, wouldn't you know it, in the third round, they enter a clinch, Johns catches inside his glove again, the cuff of the glove, and uppercuts him with the free hand on the way out, and the guy gets knocked clean out, like collapses down on his own legs, and they spring him backwards. This guy, Kevin Navidad, he should be appealing this loss, because it's on film there, him being fouled to produce the knockout. And Bisping and Brendan Fitzgerald just pretended not to see it. It was very strange. For all the stick Rogan gets, I feel like that's something Rogan would have said. He would have gone, oh, look, he's grabbing inside his glove. Sean Strickland versus Jack Marshman I skipped, because why would I watch a Jack Marshman fight? Alexander Hernandez versus Chris Gritzmacher was kind of sad, to be honest. The Grits has had some good fights in the past. I think he... was it Lozon he had a good fight against? Oh, God. That was literally his last fight. Before this one. Wow, okay. That was April 2018. And then he's been out since then. Fuck. He looked terrible. He looked really slow. And then, there's a lot of like, oh, this is what Alex Hernandez looks like against, people who aren't Donald Cerrone. But it was the same stuff. He comes in on straight lines. And Gritzmacher could have done him damage just by poking out the jab and doing like a dipping jab. Because Hernandez was running in straight every time, Instead, he was sort of turning away from the punches. He just looked really out of practice. He was turning away from the punches, leaving his, you could turn away from... the shoulder roll is turning away from a punch, but you're behind your shoulder and you use your shoulder as like the frame to protect your jawline. Instead, like Grutzmacher, each time the right hand comes in, he's turning his head to his right and just giving the full side of his jaw to Hernandez to hit. This was a rough one to watch. You know, people were saying like it looked like they grabbed someone out of the stands. It was bad. I mean, good for Hernandez to get a win. Then he opened his mouth afterwards and I went, oh, I remember why everyone wants to see you lose all the time. But, terrible match for Chris Grutzmacher to take coming back after, I presume, last cancellation, 2 cancellations due to injury. Second one was last year, tore his ACL. So, yes. Oh, rough to come back to that after that length of time off. So hitting the main card, you had Thiago Moises versus Bobby Green. And this was another one of like Bobby Green not doing quite enough. I think the thing is that he does... I was going, damn, if Bobby Green went to the body, he'd be really good. And then they pulled up the stats and he'd gone to the body as much as he'd gone to the head. And I'm going, well, why am I not noticing it? Oh, it's because like nothing he throws actually affects people. And I don't think that's because that's not me saying like he hits like a pussy. I think he holds back a bit. You know, he's very restrained with how he throws. He just sort of arm punches and throws out pokey kicks. I think, you know, if you had him putting together combinations and ending with a body shot and then you just said, I want 10 good body shots around, I think he could be much more effective. But yeah, you had some fun matchups here, like the way he was getting up off the mat, looking for the switch, you know, leaning back on Moises from back control. There was a really weird 2 moments this weekend where guys have got good leg entries and then gone after straight ankle locks. Now, okay, I am not great at the straight ankle lock personally. I don't want you to think that I'm just saying straight ankle locks suck because I'm bad at them. I am bad at them, yes, but there are people who are very good at them, like Luis Pena. Sorry, not Luis Pena. Luis, is it Panzer? Fuck, I'm gonna have to look this up. Yeah, Luis Panzer. Yeah, training partner of Buchecha. He's very good with them. Mikey Musassi is. Was he the first American Mundials? Oh no, that was BJ Penn. But yeah, one of the most recent American Mundials champions. He finished, I think it was his finals match, in something like 17 seconds with an ankle lock, a straight ankle. And he has a very interesting way of doing it, and you should definitely... giving BJJ Fanatics another shout out. Even though they didn't give me this one for free, his DVD on leg attacks is really interesting because he is one of the few guys routinely hitting the straight ankle at the highest levels. Rolly Delgado has done some great stuff on that too. He was in the corner of someone tonight. It might have been Moises. But I think when you're talking about straight ankle locks, you've got to consider, one, yes, it really helps to have a lapel. You know, if you watch Mikey Musassi and Luis Panzer both hit their best ankle locks with the lapel. And then they use their other hand for adjustments. They're pushing the knee away. They're putting one hand on the mat. They're fighting the opponent's hands off so they can clear their leg and go belly down or whatever. But the lapel really, really helps because in no-gi situations, you tend to have to like clasp your hands together so that your hand doesn't come down your chest while it's supposed to be locking the foot in place. The other thing is that the boot is still like, you can ankle lock someone through the boot, you can fight through the boot, you can take away the boot, but the boot is still a thing that exists and causes people hassle. And the moment he was on Bobby Green's leg here, Bobby Green put on the boot. He went belly down, which is typically the most, like if you are like me, shit at ankle locks, or sorry, straight ankles, and you want to learn how to finish them more effectively almost immediately, going belly down is a great solution to that. But I think the main thing is like almost anyone who's good on the legs can do a straight ankle lock, like Craig Jones. I mean, I've just been watching Craig Jones' new DVD. Shout out to Craig, sent it to me for free. But Craig Jones can finish people with ankle locks, and there are times when he will attack the ankle lock specifically as his favourite attack. Like, he attacks it from the De La Hiva a lot. You know, he plays a lot of reverse De La Hiva. If the guy steps back, he squares his hips and goes for that Kayotera style straight ankle on the leading leg. But both Thiago Moises and the guy, I can't remember his name, the guy fighting Christian Lee this weekend in one, both of them got good leg entries and then proceeded to attack the ankle. And like, if you put Craig Jones or a Ryan Hall or Gordon Ryan or a Lachlan Giles, any good leg attacker you could name in that situation, they'd probably be looking to try and change off to a heel hook of some kind, because the damage that it does is ridiculous. You can if you blow out someone's knee and they can't stand on it, very hard for them to continue fighting, with the exception of like Don Fry versus Ken Shamrock, though that might have happened in like the last seconds of the fight. But also there's just so much like wiggle room for a straight ankle to not go well. Like there are so many things you have to do to get it right. Whereas a heel hook, famously Bas Rutten learned his from seeing it on a big screen in Tokyo when they played a Pancrase advert and then did it. Well, that's what he claimed. But the heel hook, it's one of the reasons that they don't teach it to like white belts is that it's very easy to ruin the guy's knee with a level, without the struggle that it would be to get a lot of other submissions. It's just very weird because, yes, I would have given Thiago Moises absolute boy reward of the month for finishing the ankle lock here, because he finished a straight ankle in his last one. But he had the advantage of being belly down and having reaped the leg, which is always good on a straight ankle. That's the other thing, like reaping the leg on a straight ankle lock is great, and you'll see people like Rolly Delgado talk about that. But competitions where they allow you, or rule sets where they allow you to reap the leg, almost all of them allow you to heel hook, which is a way more reliable finish, to be honest, for most people. I think do you know what? I think for almost everyone, if you're really good at straight ankle locks and you can get leg entanglements, you'd probably be even better if you just used heel hooks in most situations. So yeah, that was dead odd. But then Bobby Green, I wasn't really scoring this one, but I felt like Bobby Green was being more effective, but he lost the fight, by decision. Classic Bobby Green, close decision loss. But they're not going to cut him anytime soon because he's Mr. Quarantine. He's just been fighting like every 2 weeks, basically, throughout this entire thing. Then you had Kevin Holland versus Charlie Ontaveros. Some fun standing moments in this one, like Ontaveros whipped up a lead leg axe kick that came pretty close. It's so obvious whenever you see like a top level Taekwondo person or a decent Taekwondo person throw some axe kicks in MMA. It just night and day the difference between like an axe kick and an Andy Hug axe kick, or a Michelle Waterson axe kick, which only attacks the air in front of them. But takedown occurs pretty quick, and even the first takedown, this guy, he looked a little bit like he wasn't comfortable break falling, which, in fairness, a lot of people aren't. It's not a particular... If you don't do a lot of judo... I mean, my breakfalls are probably crap because I learned my breakfalls through wrestling and jiu-jitsu, And wrestling typically doesn't need a breakfall because they train on big squishy mats. But judo, teaches you to breakfall. And then as soon as you, as someone who does wrestling and BJJ, do some stand-up with a judoka, they have to be cautious not to brain you when they throw you or break your ribs when they throw you. Because that's just like the difference between breakfalling at a good level, at the basic during the warm-up level. Actually, it used to be a thing where you do a breakfall on the pavement outside to draw attention to your new BJJ school or whatever. I've seen a few guys do that, and it's always really cool. I remember Kyozo Mifune, Mifune, the god of judo. In his book, The Canon of Judo. He was a god and he had a cannon for a right arm. No, he said like breakfalling is the most important thing, and he said that. But he's one of those people where there's like this legend that he was never thrown. And you go, well, clearly no, not a thing. But he said that the most important thing that you can gain from judo is falling practice, because he was 70, 80 when he wrote this book, and he's saying like, if I stumble down the stairs or whatever, it's going to be important to try and not fall on my head or my hand outstretched. But yeah, basically the first time Kevin Holland took him down, his head bounced off the mat, and then the next time he just ended up hurting his neck, which is always weird because then Kevin Holland runs around celebrating like, yes, just that counts as a knockout. But I mean, I suppose it does. It's a KO by verbal submission or whatever. But it's pretty scary, to be honest, because the guy, I didn't see who was reffing this. It might be Mark Smith actually, in which case props to Mark Smith because I'm normally giving him shit. But like the guy just sort of grunted nastily, and then he went a bit sort of limp, and I think the ref did a very good. That could have been one where he pulled Kevin Holland off, and then Charlie Ontaveros stood up and was like, "What the hell are you doing?" But the fact that he stayed there afterwards, just sort of groaning and not at all concerned that there wasn't a person on top of him anymore, that tells you that it was the right call, And then they stretched him out, which was scary as fuck. But I mean, Slam is the one that we're all scared that's going to be the one that does it, you know. But it wasn't even a particularly bad one. Like when people, because I watched this the following morning, and I'd seen people talking about it on Twitter, and I was expecting like, what's the one that? Well, the one that we all worry about is like suplex or whatever. To be honest, the one I worry about most is the pile driver, because there was one in. Alan Belcher got away with one on Patrick Cote, but there Bob Sapp on Big Nog, obviously. But there was one in Cage Warriors a little while ago where they let this guy. It was the reffing that allowed him to do it because he basically stuffed his opponent's head between his legs while he was pursuing the takedown along the fence, gripped his hands so one was under the crotch and one was over the butt, and then he picked him up and the guy let go. And, you know, it's like the Rose Namajunas thing, you know, you're in charge, you'll fall or whatever. But he picked him up and threatened to spike him, and the guy let go, so he didn't manage to spike him. But the ref let him do that and didn't say you can't spike people. So the next time, he picks him up and he just does spike him, you know, just properly gotch pile drives him into the mat. And then he was really, the fighter was really upset at the referee, being like, what, I've already done it once and you didn't stop me. So that was very strange. But that's the one we're really scared about. The suplex more so. But the other one that I always think of when I see Slam KO as a result is dudes pulling guard along the fence, which is always a sign that you're getting desperate anyway. But like the Gerald Harris Slam, I think Sarah Kaufman did one too. You know, people going to pull, that you push them against the fence out of a clinch, they go to pull guard, you put a frame across their neck and you just drop them on their head, on the back of their head. That's always a bad one. But this was none of those. This was just a dude getting tripped from the clinch. Greg Hardy knocked out Maurice Green in a bum versus bum spectacular. You know, heavyweights. What are you going to do? Bryce Mitchell versus Andre Fili. Now, this one I quite liked a lot, actually. It turned out quite... A lot of things we talked about in the podcast last week came up. We were talking about how Andre Fili doesn't really get his right hand going, tends to do jab and then deal with takedowns. And I said, well, maybe he could switch to southpaw and jab from there. And then he did. I think Fili is a listener or a reader. At some point I've interacted with him, but he's a boy anyway. But yeah, stuff we were talking about. The other thing that keyed me into maybe a listener, zero wall walking in this fight, if you noticed. He was doing a lot of turning himself off the fence, hip bump. This was like an upper clinic, you know, the bridge. Because Bryce Mitchell, pretty good guard passer and has been excelling when guys are turning to get up along the fence. And he's getting hit with basic bridge sweeps. You know, he's getting swept over with bridges. I mean, timing is a huge deal of that. Like, he did the Roger Gracie, you know, half guard, get the shoulder pressure, bring your free knee in, and then you begin sliding into three-quarter mount. And as he did it, Fili hip bumped, turned away, got up. And then later on, he moved from side control to mount, and Fili hip bumped and got up again. And then I think it was about 3 times he swept him with the hip bump, and then he was on the bottom in side control along the fence, put his feet on the fence, hip bumped and went all the way over so that he was on the back of Turtle and then stood up. It was just a clinic in how to use the hip bump, because they're always talking about that as being like the most basic move in jiu-jitsu, and it worked really well. And I suppose that's probably because a lot of what Bryce Mitchell deals with, or is training to deal with, is guys moving to the fence and using the fence to get up because it's the most reliable way, or, you know, working their way back to guard or whatever. Whereas Fili's just bridging, trying to sweep him and then coming up to the turtle and getting up while he's off balance. But you saw Mitchell using, you know, he's a southpaw and he was circling away to his left, circling back and to the left, back and to the left, and looking for counter left hands occasionally, throwing some nice side kicks and hook kicks and things just to sort of mix things up. And then he'd look for the high crotch, which we talked about in the last episode too. Lots of interesting scrambles came out of that too. So it was really interesting. And then the commentators throughout were like, Bryce Mitchell, only the second fighter in history to get a custom pair of shorts from Reebok. And you're like, why are you advertising how shit Reebok have been at their job? They would sell so many more fight kits if they did. And like Anderson Silva was on this card, he wore yellow shorts because they were the Brazilian shorts, but it would have cost nothing to make a yellow pair of shorts with the Kill Bill or you know, Game of Death black stripe down the side, or just redesign Anderson's classic shorts, but with a big old Reebok logo on them. You know, you could have sold that rather than a pair of black shorts with Anderson Silva written on them. Anyway, main event, Anderson Silva versus Uriah Hall. Do you know what? This was actually some of the better offensive work consistently that I've seen Anderson Silva do. He was using the jab, he was hooking off the jab, lots of hooking off the jab, and I loved that. Using some kicks and things to annoy Hall. And backing him up. And Uriah Hall looked like he was scared to do anything for a lot of the fight. And then the way that it happened, it happened at the end of round 3 and then in round 4 too. The end was in round 4, but Silva overstepped himself and got dropped. The same way he'd been dropping people throughout his career, getting guys moving in on offense, taking extra steps. He starts wading in with punches, and Uriah Hall just sideswipes him with was it a right hand? One of his hands, but sideswiped him and knocked him down and out. Sad way for Anderson Silva to go. Obviously, what was expected, but even then, Uriah Hall managed to make it not a particularly impressive performance. And on the subject of not particularly impressive performances, Gegard Musassi versus Douglas Lima. Fuck me if both these lads didn't come out of this fight looking worse than when they went in. I mean, people who were like, Gegard Musassi could kill Israel Adesanya were idiots anyway. But people were pretending that he was at least like top 5 in the world or whatever. He looked so slow in this fight. And someone asked me, like, what for real, what do you think of Gegard Musassi? Because I was busy memeing after this fight. But I put up a little thread on Twitter, go have a look at it, basically saying, Gegard's problems are, he's good from the top, he's good from the bottom, he's got a great jab, good inside low kick. I didn't actually put that, but that is a thing that I believe about him. His problems are, one, wrestling. If he can't control where the fight's happening, he's a bit of he's a bit stuck. He's good from the bottom, but he's not good enough from the bottom that he can get up from underneath like really strong top players consistently. And then when he tries to get guys down, he doesn't have the wrestling to do it. He has trouble too. But the other one is that he looks like a completely different fighter once he decides to throw a power punch. Again, go look at that Twitter thread because I put up a couple of examples, but just from the very first fight that was on Fight Pass when I searched Gegard Musassi, when I searched regional champion Gegard Musassi, there was a fight against Thiago Santos. And in that fight, he comes out jabbing side on. He jabs, he dips, and gets down behind his lead shoulder in anticipation of return. Or he jabs and pulls his head back. And he's beautifully in position to slip a return and possibly come back with a counter. But the moment he wants to throw his right hand, and this happened a couple of times in the fight, I mean, it's only a short fight, but it still happened a couple of times. To throw his right hand, he squares up and his head comes up in the air and he just sort of like lumbers in. And you can see exactly the same thing happen in the little GIF I shared on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook being like, this is the man to beat Adesanya. Lima hits him with a jab and he tries to throw his right hand and his head's up in the air and he gets hit with a left hook or a right hook after it or whatever. He's just, the moment he wants to power punch, he looks so sloppy compared to what he looks like when he's jabbing. And it's particularly notable because like the people that he's opened up against have been like Vitor Belfort once he was a shell of himself. Even that fight, people are like, oh, Musassi's a killer now. And you're like, no, it's just he felt comfortable opening up because he was fighting an absolute dead duck. When you see him throwing his right hand, basically in this fight, he looked so slow. And it was basically, the criticism that I leveled against Douglas Lima last time and the time before he fought and the time before he fought is that he doesn't do enough. He just fucking stands there and watches the other guy work. It's great. Sometimes he hits people really hard and knocks them out or whatever. Or sometimes he can land a good low kick or two. But even against Rory, even in their second fight, after having lost the first fight by staring at him too much, he still wasn't pushing his advantages enough, He's just, like, I'm not going to say killer instinct, but just, like, he cannot push his advantages at all. In this one, he was quicker than Musassi, he could hurt him with the low kicks, and he just sort of backed himself onto the fence and stood there. I mean, zero ring craft is always a bad thing, obviously, but, Musassi took him down in the first round, and then the rest of the time he couldn't take him down. So Lima's just sort of standing on the fence, letting him pick away at him with inside low kicks and shit. Even then, not an awful lot happened. Basically, everyone who watched this fight was super disappointed. Even the people who were like gagging for Gegard Musassi to win. And I still think that Douglas Lima presents some interesting matchups to the UFC's division. But when you consider that like 2 of the top guys there, well, no, 3. I've seen, Gilbert Burns did it in his last fight too. These guys who excel at putting you on the fence, backing you up with pressure and then beating you up along the fence while you're trying to work your way up. It doesn't matter if they couldn't get Douglas Lima down because he's going to keep putting himself on the fence and not doing enough. This was a very Woodley-esque performance from Lima. So anyway, that they crowned Gegard Musassi the champion off a win over a welterweight and a loss to a 50-year-old Machida before that. That's the state of Bellator's middleweight division. And apparently Lima wants to continue competing at middleweight. The rest of the card wasn't actually that bad. Jake Hager fought some scrub. They clearly thought this guy. They clearly thought this guy was completely useless because he's a big fat dude. He's 40 years old and he's never been beyond 50 seconds of the first round or something like that, or a minute 50 seconds. You look down his record and it's like, he's got several wins. He had 2 pro wins and like 3 amateur wins, but they're all inside the first minute. And you're going, okay, yeah, looks good if Jake Hager takes that guy down and beats the shit out of him. And then he couldn't. he got beaten up by this old dude. And to be fair, the old dude, much better cardio than you would have expected from a big fat dude who'd only gone 1 minute 50 before. So shout outs to him, whoever he was. That beautiful man of mystery. And then one I got to watch live was the one championship, Inside the Matrix, I think was the subtitle. I mean, they'd just gone off the fucking rails with the titles. Because it used to be like Pursuit of Honor, Guardians of something. You know, it was at least cool sounding things. This one, Inside the Matrix, just made no sense at all. But it was a good card. They had several of their champions in action on the same night. Zhong Jingnan, their flyweight champion. I think she's strawweight, actually. I think that might be like the weight. Oh, fuck, I don't know. But their lightweight champion, Martin Nguyen. Their welterweight champion, Christian Lee. And their middleweight and light heavyweight champion, Ong Lashong. I tuned in just in time to watch Edward Foliang versus Tony Caruso. And, I used to talk about Team Lake on this podcast, being like, they're very interesting because they've succeeded in MMA without really any wrestling. And to be fair, Kevin Bellignon beat Bibiano Fernandez, which is crazy because Bibiano Fernandez can wrestle. But yeah, man, this is bad because, like, Chevelle's going, at one point, the Team Lakai had 5 world champions in one, and he went, oh yeah, until they hired good wrestlers. Because Tony Caruso, I don't know if he's a good wrestler. He's from Australia, but he was a good grappler at any rate. And literally a moment into this fight, he pushed Edward Foliang to the fence, took the grip under the crotch, and did the Habib sweep. Pulled him off the fence and kicked out his hopping leg. And the whole fight was just Edward Foliang on the bottom, struggling. And then when he did get up, he was knackered. The dude is built like a brick shithouse, but he was so slow on the feet because he was completely exhausted. So Tony Caruso was able to hit him with 3 punches. It was bad. But then you had Zhong Jingnan versus Tiffany Teo. And this was, Zhong Jingnan is someone who you should probably keep an eye on because, I mean, she came up the same route as... certainly she was on some of the same cards as Yan Jianan and Weili Zhang, or Zhang Weili, rather. I'm going to confuse myself because I'm going to say, like, multiple... I won't be able to remember which way around. I don't know who these people's family names are and which ones are the Christian ones. Not Christian, but given. But yeah, Zhong Jingnan, I believe she's the same weight as Weili Zhang, apparently. But Weili Zhang is built like a brick shithouse, and Zhong Jingnan is tiny. But she was fighting Tiffany Teo, who had beaten Michelle Nicolini. So I was quite interested in that. They fought before. I didn't see the first fight. But this fight, oh boy, it was not great. Tiffany Teo came out, and her game plan seemed to be to do better than expected on the feet. Because she didn't attempt a takedown until like round 3. And she got the takedown, but like it was late in round 3. If you are a grappler in MMA, you have to be aware that time... I mean, you have to be aware as a striker that time is a thing. But grappling takes time. It takes time to strike with the person to get them to forget about the takedown attempt. It takes time to complete the takedown attempt, even if it's a good one. It takes time to pass the guard. It takes time to get on the back. It takes time to pull them down if they start climbing the fence. And it takes time, even once you're, within grasping distance of a submission, it takes time to lock it in and peel off their hands while they try and death grip your forearms or whatever, and finish it. Like, it's a very time-consuming game. You can't be attempting takedowns in the last minute of the 3rd round, because if you don't complete the takedown, you've lost 3 rounds now, so you've already got to finish it. And if you do complete the takedown, you've still only got like half a minute to finish working, to finish the submission or whatever. It was terrible, terrible game planning. I mean, she looked better than expected on the feet. I will grant that. I thought she looked pretty good, but she was still losing on the feet. Just like, why? Why are you doing this? And then Michael Chiavello kept having to say, the former choir girl. Could you believe she was a choir girl? Blah, blah, blah. They're like, well, I mean, I could believe anyone did something when they were 10 years old and grew up to be anything. When you're 10, you're not the person you're going to be. Like, what? Just... But Zhong Jingnan, like, people have been pretty hot on her. She looked really good against Angela Lee in actually both their fights, to be honest. But but she looked crap here. Like, she won, but she was throwing these overhands that were basically downward hammer fists over, trying to throw them over Tiffany Tia's jab. And she was getting counterpunched a lot coming in. Like, I just was not impressed with either party in this fight, particularly, to be honest. So I don't know why I'm telling you about it, because basically the only reason I tell you about one fight is to say, go watch them. But then you had Tan Lee, don't know. I think Ryan Hall was bigging him up. I think it might be a training partner of Ryan Hall, but Tan Lee versus Martin Nguyen. Martin Nguyen, well, actually, Tan Lee I'd done some stuff on for... We looked at him on the film room a little while ago. Actually, I need to do a new film room. That's probably what I'll do this week at some point. But we did some stuff on him. Fun kicker, taekwondo guy. Good hands too, actually, as we found out in this fight. Well, Martin Nguyen certainly did. And Martin Nguyen I did a full article on previously. It was called Martin Nguyen One and Done. An earlier Patreon article, but yeah, I'll link it in the description. And basically, Martin Nguyen, I've been trying to put together something on power punching for smaller fighters, and how some of these guys who get like a reputation for legendary power despite being small, where like I was talking about Dillian White earlier, throwing 6-inch hammer fist and knocking dudes down. With smaller guys, typically you tend to see a lot of sneaking your weight into punches in different ways. So like the most obvious way to get your weight into a punch is to like step forward with your left foot and throw yourself onto your lead leg as you throw your overhand, which is what Martin Nguyen does all the time. Prince Nazim's corkscrew uppercut, it was basically he ducked down and loaded his lead leg and then jumped up off it. There's a few, but like finding ways to throw your weight into a punch, which makes for really committed moves. And Nguyen has been really good at that. If you watch his fight against Gafarov, he waits for the inside low kick on his lead leg and he throws himself forward and just sparks this dude. And the other one was Edward Foliang. He slides down the side of his turning back kick and hits him with an overhand. He's really good at stepping in on the overhand. Problem is that he's never been great on the lead, and you really saw that in this fight. He looked like he was running Thani ragged in the first round. He basically pressured him towards the fence and then had Thani running from side to side to try and get out. And was it round 2? Hang on, let me just check. I think there was 2 rounds of that. Yeah, there was 2 rounds of basically chasing him around. And then round 3, Henry Hooft, who's in Martin Nguyen's corner, says, you've got to go forward and do something. So Martin Nguyen starts pumping the jab and throwing right hands. And like it's the most success he's had all fight, but it's really one note. And he hurts Thun Lee and chases him, and then Thun Lee finally catches him with I think it was a check right hook, or a lead hook as he's coming in, and knocks him down and follows up for the finish. And basically, it was because Nguyen was throwing himself into his punches, exposing his face every time, and also just like throwing the same things over and over again. It was the most I'd ever seen him jab, but it was still not enough. He needs to throw some inside low kicks. He needs to jab. He needs to have a left hook. He landed one good left hook to the body in like round 1, but he's so right hand dominant, and you get diminishing returns. Like Anderson Silva fought this weekend, or retired this week. Well, he didn't retire this weekend, but had his last fight in the UFC this weekend, and he's a great example of diminishing returns. Once people realize that if you just don't attack him, he won't counter you. He got into these boring staring contests, and he could do enough to win them, but like that's kind of where Martin Nguyen was. He was getting to the point where these guys knew that if they threw at him, he'd try and time his right hand across the top, or he'd try and return on their low kicks with the right hand. And if you're just looking for the one thing, it's a lot easier. So Martin Nguyen needs to go away and have a good work on his left hand. Tie your right hand behind your back for however long. Roy Jones actually used to do that. His dad used to tie one of his hands behind his back and then have him spar dudes. Which, I suppose it's a lot easier to fight with both hands once you've had to tie one hand behind your back. But great for Tan Lee. And I was joking in this one because basically one strategy has been, they found some they found some Asian talent with Team Lakai. But for the most part, they seem to have gone into good American gyms and been like, have you got any Asians? Because they got Martin Nguyen and Ong Lashong are their 2 big champions on this card. Martin Nguyen billed as from Vietnam, I believe, and Ong Lashong billed as from Myanmar. He's the most famous man in Myanmar, or the most famous Burmese in the world, apparently. Both of them just hard knocks 365 lads. Or no, what is it? 40s MMA? Fuck. Where is Henry Hooft teaching now? But Henry Hooft's team. And, neither of them is the best man in their division on that team. So it's a bit weird. Surely Michael Johnson could be lightweight champion of 1, but Yeah, Christian Lee, co-main event, also American, but billed as Singaporean. He was fighting Yuri Lepicus, I don't know. But this one, like, they got off to it, immediately ran at each other, tripped one of them through the other on top. But basically, Christian Lee moved to mount this guy. This guy did a beautiful, like, kicking overhead, pushed Christian Lee overhead, and rolled back as if trying to suck his own dick. And the old Dion Kutalaba special. But then he managed to basically land in a leg reap. He ended up on a leg. And instead of like attacking a heel hook or trying to get on top or whatever, he went from, might have been single leg X or whatever, but he went to outside Ashi, which is like both your legs outside one of theirs, and tried to attack a straight ankle lock. And then he went belly down, and Christian Lee just came up and punched him in the head. Back of the head, because it's Christian Lee. Can't win a fight without a flagrant overlooked foul. But just beat him in the back of the head while this guy's trying to extend his hips with this leg under his armpit. As I was saying earlier, I don't understand why you would get an awesome leg entry and then try and straight ankle lock him. And then in the main event, Renier de Riddler took on Ong Lashong, and this guy's from Holland, and I went, oh, that'll be interesting. Comes out clearly fucking terrible striking. Like, he had no idea what he's doing. I went, uh-oh, this guy's going to get sparked if he doesn't do something soon. Luckily, grabs a hold of Ong Lashong, immediately gets on his back because everyone is able to do that because Ong Lashong is not great wrestling. And I was looking at this going, Yuji Shimada's the ref. Yuji Shimada basically gave Ong Lashong his world title. Ong Lashong fought Vitaly Big Dash twice. Second fight, he actually won. But he did it by rocking him in the first 10 seconds and then getting taken down and having his back taken over and over again. And Yuji Shimada would go, work, nope, break, up, from like increasingly dominant positions throughout the fight. But in this one, Yuji Shimada actually let Renier de Riddler work from Ong Lashong's back, and Ong Lashong's cheating his arse off. He's grabbing the fence, he's putting his toes in the fence, he's grabbing in the cuff of the glove, and then he's looking at Yuji Shimada like, come on, he's not doing anything while he's on his back. Then finally he got a choke over the jaw, basically a mandible crush, and Ong Lashong popped his own chin out and gave up the choke and tapped out. I like Ong Lashong, but he's not like world class. This was not great. I think really the standouts from the card are Tan Lee and Christian Lee, and Martin Nguyen always has had good skills but not enough of them. But yeah, that's all we really needed to watch about that card. But as I said after this card, it was nice to see the Dutch finally pick up another real world title. So yeah, not a bad week of fights. I mean, kind of sad, the Anderson Silva thing. But there was some good stuff on the UFC card. I think my performance of the weekend is probably Andre Fili in the loss. I really enjoyed just watching him wait and then hip bump. And also keep working. Like, he would bump one way, bump the other. He didn't stop until he was able to get up. And I think that's so often the hardest thing. If you grapple at all, like, the hard thing is working your energy up and going, right, I'm gonna escape now. I'm gonna hip bump and shrimp or whatever. And then you do one and the guy stops it. To be able to keep going at like 10 minutes, 15 minutes into a fight. That's really the secret to, being good at getting out from terrible situations. So we got some stuff coming up this weekend. If Thiago Santos versus Glover Teixeira doesn't fall through again, we got Bellator Manhoff versus Anderson, which is just the dumbest matchup I've ever seen. 45-year-old middleweight Melvin Manhoff is going to go up to light heavyweight to fight Corey Anderson. Manhoff, who can't wrestle, but equally Corey Anderson, we're kind of worried about his chin and brain. So, disaster waiting to happen there. What else is going on? One Championship's middleweight division, they're going to do a title fight, but I don't know any of these lads involved. Nasty Yukin's on the card, though, which is pretty great. It's like a Shoryuken, but nastier. And then you got that UFC card where Andrei Arlovsky is being fed to Tanner Bosa because we wanted to get a knockout and become the next greatest puncher at heavyweight. But we'll talk about fucking Giga Chikadze on the card. Awesome. We'll talk all about that later in the week. Oh, and Yan Jianan. Way, we talk about her. Anyway, sorry, that's all stuff for later in the week. I'm going to be writing something, probably going to do some more videos because I'm going to be stuck inside, not seeing anyone for the next 4 weeks. So if you have anyone interesting that I've not seen before, fucking send them to me because I'm gagging for shit to do while the lockdown's going on. But anyway, if you want to support the podcast, get in on the articles and film rooms and episodes and things we do for the Patreon boys, sign up to the Patreon. If you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsgonebypodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing at any time, fightprimer.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack. Douglas Lima's Ringcraft bless.